Thanks everyone. Let's make a start. It's 6 p.m. Good evening. I'm Mayor Patrick Hall. I now declare the agenda briefing of Tuesday the 14th of September 2021 open. As I said, the time is 6 p.m. We start by acknowledging the Wadjuk people, the traditional custodians of the land. We also pay our respects to elders both past and present. Tonight's briefing is only for the purpose of asking questions and seeking clarification on agenda items for the next ordinary council meeting. We're not obviously able to debate matters or make speeches. It's just for question asking. No decision making or entering into debate is to occur. May I ask everyone present this evening to turn off all electronic devices, that includes mobile phones, iPads and tablets, for the duration of the briefing. Tonight's agenda briefing is being recorded. A copy of the audio recording shall be available on the City's website within 72 hours of the meeting. Agenda briefings are public meetings and any information you provide may be publicly accessible. In relation to disclosures of interest, the prescribed disclosure requirements apply to meetings that are convened under the provisions of the Local Government Act. However, it may be perceived as ethically unacceptable and at odds with the probity and accountability principles of the Act and codes of conduct for elected members to participate in forums, briefings or workshops where they are aware they have a conflict of interest and do not declare it. In the interests of openness and accountability, elected members are encouraged to disclose a conflict of interest where they are aware they have one when attending a forum, briefing or workshop, and where applicable, remove themselves from the room while the matter is being discussed. At item 2, attendance, the full council is present. Thank you, councillors. There are no apologies. Approved leave of absence, there is none. Disclosures of interest. CEO, have we received any disclosures of interest?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Not at this time.
Thank you. We move to item 4, questions. Question time for the public. Response to previous questions taken on notice will be noted in the ordinary council meeting agenda. At item 4.2, questions from the public. The time set aside for public questions is 15 minutes, which may be extended if necessary. A question must relate to items listed on the agenda paper. For recording purposes, please state your name and address and then proceed to ask your question. If an answer cannot be provided at tonight's meeting, the question will be taken on notice and an answer will be provided. In accordance with policy ADO2, members of the public who have registered their interest to ask questions with the City's administration shall be called on in the order in which registrations were received. I open question time now. By my recollection, it's 6:02 p.m. City has received questions, I believe, from both Richard Aldridge and Marnie Aldridge. Can I ask one of you to step forward, please?
Good evening, Mr Mayor, Councillors, CEO Kane, Directors and those in the public gallery. My name is Marnie Aldridge and I live at Minota Avenue, Shelley. Currently, the Department of Local Government Standards panel does not undertake any investigations of Code of Conduct breaches. The complainant has to provide evidence for their claims. So question 1, why are the City officers recommending a potentially costly investigation process funded by ratepayers that could include subcontracting elements of the investigation to third-party professionals, when this is not current practice by the Department of Local Government Standard Panel?
CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The City is recommending a process for consideration. This is based on guidance both from the WOLGA, our sector leader, and after reviewing the policies and practices of other local governments. You would note that it's quite normal for any cost associated with these to be absorbed by the local government. So if you were, for instance, to put a complaint to the standards panel, that would cost the City for its consideration to resolve. By using an independent party to be able to provide advice, we're keeping all the complaints at arm's length, so there will be some costs, but of course if the City doesn't receive any complaints at any one stage, there'll be no cost to ratepayers.
Thank you. Second question.
So if a councillor wishes to challenge the council's finding with SAT, who pays for the lawyer to defend the council findings? Will it be the ratepayers or will it be privately funded?
CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Under the Model Code of Conduct, an elected member has the opportunity to object to the process and not accept the finding, in which case the matter would be referred to as a breach of the standards panel. In accordance with that and rights of natural justice, if an elected member were to approach the city for access to legal assistance through its policy, then it would be up to the city to consider that at the time.
Question 3.
To clarify that, does the city actually pay for its defence using ratepayer money? That was the actual question I asked.
CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The city is not a defendant in these matters, so the city cannot be able to incur legal expenses relating to defending it. The city may obtain legal advice in order to assist the elected members in deliberation of the item, but that would not be for defence of the city.
You have a further question?
Yes, yesterday afternoon, I put in an e-petition regarding my concern about councillors and mayors endorsing and promoting candidates in the upcoming election. Mr Mayor, as this petition is addressed to you...
your question must be in relation to an agenda matter tonight.
Yes, it's the code of conduct.
So that's not relevant. An
e-petition. It's the code of conduct.
I beg your... Yes, not the code of conduct is not on the agenda, it's the complaints policy. So it's not relevant. I have to rule the question not relevant.
Through a petition.
You've been dealing with the CEO about the e-petition, I believe. You'll have to do that. That's not
I
a relevant
haven't
question
actually had it approved, so I was just asking the CEO if it was going to be approved.
You'll have to send an email to the CEO. I'm ruling that not relevant. It's not relevant to tonight's agenda.
Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Aldridge.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Aldridge.
Good evening, Council. It's again regarding the complaints policy. From what I understand, that after the investigation and the private investigation or whatever happens regarding a complaint, it's then up to the council to sit in judgment to one of its peers. How won't that cause animosity between council members?
You realise that this is a draft policy. It hasn't been adopted by council yet. Still open for amendment. We have a draft policy that's being considered by council. It seems like you're taking the position that has been adopted. Is that right?
No, okay. During this draft policy, what's been drafted and recommended by the officers so far, it appears that the City of Canning councillors will in fact have to be sitting in judgment on their peers. According to the draft, how won't that cause animosity between councillors?
CEO, I'm not sure if you're able to answer that. It's a very subjective question. I don't think the CEO can actually say whether or not it's going to cause animosity. Have you got another question, Mr. Aldridge? Something specific? We can't talk about people's feelings or
if someone
how something might affect somebody. Your second question?
If someone comes in and puts in a complaint, who will be the person who decides what to investigate, what not to investigate, and how much will be spent? I just need the person, so it's one question and not three.
Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Under the Model Code of Conduct and the decision of Council, the CEO has been appointed as the authorised officer for receiving complaints. That decision is resolved by the CEO.
Your final question, Mr. Aldridge.
If at some stage in the future at the City of Canning a voting block of 6 councillors who are all working together evolves, how will the process work? Because surely they'll just always find anyone within their voting block innocent of whatever they've been charged for.
Yeah, we don't work on hypotheticals here. That's not a relevant question.
Okay, so what safeguards are in place to prevent the possibility of a voting block just clearing their own members for misconduct continuously?
I still don't think that's a matter that the CEO can address. CEO, are you able to provide any response to that?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I won't deal with any subjectives to this, but there is a process of natural justice that's afforded to this. That's why the city will be using or recommended an external person to do the review and looking to provide external legal advice in the matters are complex back before council. It is open to any elected member not to accept the findings and therefore have the matter dealt by the standards panel, in which case they would have a right at that time for consideration. So there are checks and balances throughout the process that afford natural justice to any party.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Any further questions from the public gallery? Thank you. I'll close public question time now. The time is 8 minutes past 6 p.m. Thank you. We move to item 4.3, deputations. There are none this evening. Items brought forward, obviously there are none this evening. Reports of committee meetings. An Audit and Risk Committee meeting was held last night. A recommendation will be included in the ordinary council meeting agenda of the 21st of September, which is next Tuesday, for council to receive the 2 June 2021 unconfirmed minutes and adopt the recommendation made by that committee. At item 7, reports. Item 7 outlines at 7.1 the Chief Executive Officer, Mr Stephen Kane, OC 005 of 21, the title of that report being Advocacy Priorities for 2021 and 2022. This item is still under review and will be included in the ordinary council meeting agenda as a late item for the 21 September 2021 meeting. Director Warren Bowe at item 7.2 is a responsible officer for, he's the Director of Canning Corporate and Commercial at CC 041 of 21. That report is a late item. The complaints policy for council members, committee members and candidates. The officer's recommendation is on page 2 of the circulated additional late report and is on screen right now. Councillors, I will remind you just that tonight is just for asking questions. It's not for debate or for making statements and speeches in relation to this. So we've had a number of SIBs and workshops on the matter, but tonight is just for asking questions. Do I have any questions in relation to that item? Thank you, Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question, I suppose it goes to Director Bowe through you. Point 2, request the Chief Executive Officer to provide a report on 9th of October 2021 Ordinary Council meeting. I'm just wondering whether option B, does that include what we expect to be the WELGA component?
Director Bowe?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, it does, Councillor Barry. Option B, as we discussed at the most recent workshop, aims or recommends the establishment of a committee to deal with the complaints and the terms of reference to be determined by Council at a later meeting.
And last night at the Audit Risk Committee meeting, I was going to ask a similar question. The Victorian one incorporates elected members and employees. Does the WELGA one that we know of incorporate employees as well?
Director Bowe? CEO, did you want to address that?
Thank you. The Model Code of Conduct only applies to elected members. It doesn't apply to staff. There is a separate code of conduct that applies to staff.
So whatever was written in the Victorian one will be deleted out in relation to employees?
So there is no reference to the Victorian model in whatever will come into WA. As said, they are 2 entirely different systems.
Well, it's just that they did mention it as the Victorian model.
I know they have mentioned it, but in terms of the way they deal with it for elected members only, because the statutory provisions only apply to you as elected members, not to staff.
So the staff don't have a code of conduct?
So going through the chair, as I said, there is a separate code of conduct for staff. And there is obviously, in any complaint that's dealt with through staff will be dealt with but it doesn't come back through council. So
will council have any input or vote on the employee one?
No, it's not a responsibility for.
So it's just going to be a CEO instruction, is it?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Sweeney?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just one question in regards to the definitions under vexatious proceedings. I thought when this matter came up a little while ago and in debate, I thought, it was my understanding that we were going to leave this out for the fact that this came up with the Minister for Local Government and he gave a ruling or he gave an opinion on what he thought about vexatious proceedings when it comes to councils. And I thought that in terms of full transparency, I thought that it was going to be left out of this, and if it was going to come up again, that would be something that we may include later on down the track. I didn't think it was going to be part of this initial draft. That was my understanding.
Director Bowe?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There was certainly some discussion at the strategic issues briefing and the workshops, and there was disparate views about whether or not the reference to vexatious proceedings should be included. you may have your view, Councillor Sweeney, but the view of the administration is that is appropriate and to be included in both options. But again, that's up to the council to resolve.
So the matter's open to be amended. I mean, you could amend it on the evening or choose to put an amendment. If you wanted it deleted, that would be up to you.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, councillors? Thank you. We'll move on now to CC 042 of 21, and that's the budget review as at the 31st of July 2021. The officer's recommendation is on page 2 of the circulated late agenda and is also on the screen. Councillors, are there any questions in relation to that matter? Councillor Barry.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr Mayor, through you to, I think it's Director Bowe. Yes, it is. On page 3, it talks about, and I think I mentioned this a couple of meetings ago, words to the effect that the carry forwards and the large amounts of sums that I believe to be the carryovers, and I think words to the effect that the city was aspiring to be able to complete larger capital works projects. But it says in this city's capital budget, circa $55 million for the 2021 financial year in response to the COVID pandemic was far greater than the previous years and well beyond the means of our organisation to complete this in one single financial year. Now, I note that there is, so question 1 there is, do we find ourselves in the position where we cannot fulfil our promises and obligation to the ratepayers if we have something like a $55 million budget?
Director Bowe.
Yes, that's my view, Councillor Barry, and the view of the executive. $55 million was roughly $15 or $18 million more than our annual capital works program in years gone by. We agreed to bring forward a number of additional capital works projects. A number of those were proposed to be loan funded in direct response to the council's desire to have a budget which promoted and stimulated the economy in relation to COVID.
Okay, second
Councillor Barry.
question is in relation to 15, it says carry forward items are funded from prior year budgets and are represented as surplus funding at the end of the financial year. Including these items with the subsequent 2021 year budget will impact on the adopted financial ratios as a result of increasing expenditure along with the additional revenue. Now, my question then, does that mean that if we get a better outcome for our financial health indicator in the coming budget, does that in turn have a negative effect on the past one?
Director Bowe.
I don't think it has any effect on the past financial health indicators, Mr Mayor, but I'm happy to provide some additional commentary after I consult with Mr Adewale.
Okay. CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And it can't affect the past indicators because they are in the past. They are resolved at the point of time with the completion of the particular financial year. So the indication there is simply you are carrying forward a balance, both an additional line of expenditure and an additional line of income. The way the indicators are set up, because they get rebalanced at the start of the year, it might have some minor impact on the indicators. I don't think it's that significant.
Thank you. Councillor Barry.
Just in relation to on page 4.
Just your microphone, please.
Excuse me. On page 4, it talks about, in the summary, it is proposed to amend the 2021-22 annual budget by including the following 2021 funds, which basically total around about $7.5 million. I'll ask you to correct me if that's wrong. And then it has another 2.7 that it talks about from the last year. And it says then, the below commentary provides information of some of the key areas and projects being carried forward. Operating grants, 1.4 million. Operating expenditure, 2 million. Non-operating grants, 8 million. And capital works carried forward, 20 million. Now, I think there's a couple of other on the other municipal transfers from reserves and loans. Are all those figures carry forwards?
Director Bowe.
Yeah, Thank you, Mr Mayor. The figures in 19A, 19B, 19C and 19D are the gross amounts, and the figures referenced in 17, 17A and 17B are the net amounts.
Sorry?
Net
Are
amounts.
the net amounts.
Okay, so we're
exclusive of
carrying forward, what,
reserves and
1.43, 11, 30, 31, 37, roughly about $40 million. Is that correct? In one shape, form or other, even cash or capital works, etc. Is that correct?
Director Bowe?
I'll provide some clarity in writing on that response,
Take that on
Mr.
notice.
Mayor.
We'll get back to you with some detail. Councillor
Yes,
Barry?
and well, you won't mind me if asking this again next week, because I think this is vital for the ratepayers to hear, because like I've asked this before, if we're carrying forward $41 million, and I understand that some of the projects...
I get it, but you can ask a question, but now you're making a speech.
All right, so you'd rather hear that next week?
I'd rather hear it. Well,
Okay.
I'll hear it next week because we can't hear it today. So this is about asking questions about what's on the agenda. Now, you've asked your question, we'll get you an
Yeah, it's
answer.
just
I understand what you want to
basic-
do, but you're now making a speech.
Basic
And that's not what tonight's
clarification,
for.
Mr Mayor. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, Councillor Ponaturo, you had your hand up earlier.
Thank you. This question to Director Bowe. One of the questions is the capital expenditure, the graph, page 27. So it shows the revised budget, all of them on the same bar, and then we have the year-to-date budget, actual plus commitments as well. So wouldn't you want to put the revised budget also on the graph where it's growing, where it's page 27?
Page 27. Yeah, I don't
Oh,
think
did I
you're,
just
you're,
jump
you're not
one
talking to the
ahead of
right.
that?
Yeah, no, you're talking to the completely wrong item, I think.
Not the
Councillor?
wrong item, it's just my pages went up. Sorry.
Oh, it's not the wrong item, it's your page. Is there a problem with the page? Talking to the next report, okay.
You know, it just
Yeah, I think you're
jumped the
looking at the
page.
wrong report, councillor, that's okay. Any other, yeah, of course. Yep.
Just in relation to the City of Canning carry forward fund, by next week's meeting, can I have that repeated in a font that's legible? Because
You're talking
that's
about,
impossible to read.
what page is it?
Well, it's 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, up to 20.
Just stand by, councillor.
No, that's the next one.
Yeah, we'll sort that out for the meeting, no problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. We'll then move on to, Councillor Bain, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In regard to CapEx projects, Manning Road, Hamilton to Albany Highway, $90,000. How come that's not on the carryover list, please? Thank you.
Director Bowe.
Yeah, I'll take that on notice and
We'll get an answer
back
for
to
you on that,
Councillor
Councillor Bain. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Ponaturo.
Thank you. Just a question back again to the page 10 on the budget review as of 31st of July 2021. It's again on the 31 million on the adopted budget and carry forward is 20. Is that the 31 million, I think this is probably this question to the CEO, which I asked some time ago. Is it the 31 million, the CapEx projects, we spent only half of that? You
Director?
sent this report? Because it's just an adopted budget is there, but how much have we spent
Director?
on that?
Page 10, apparently.
10 is the attachment 1 on ours. Is that-
You sure you're looking at the right page there, councillor? Page 10, the
Budget review
director and the
statement, I
CEO
said
looking at
31st
something
of July
completely different.
2021, carried forwards, item, attachment 1.
Attachment, okay,
Oh, you're looking at the large attachments.
that's right. But which line of the large attachment?
Which line are you looking at there?
Capital expenditures, adopted budget 31 million, carry forward 20, and revised is 51.
You have the question,
I've
CEO?
got the line here, Mr Mayor, and you see obviously the 20 matches the description contained in the officer's report back on page page, reference to 19.19D on page 4. So, Councillor Ponatore, just what was the specific,
what was the
specific
question?
So the adopted budget was 31 million. So do we want to report that what was the expenditure spent today in this, or are you going to explain on the notes then?
So
It's just
the
a
adopted budget was $31 million for the year. We do have the carry forward, which we have to pick up from last year to carry forward. So we end up with a new adopted budget of 51 million during the course of the year. And when you see the monthly financial statement, you'll see the percentage of projects that are being spent and budgeted for. And obviously, as we've made reference earlier on, last year a sum of $55 million was just too great for the city to try and deliver in a capital works. Comparatively speaking, Gosnells down the road delivered just over $30 million last year, and that's as a comparable size council. So I'm a guess field, that's about the scale of what the capability of the organisation is to deliver. But we will continue to report each month on the track of that total $51 million and how we're delivering it during the course of the year.
And are we comfortable to deliver that in the next financial year? Are we comfortable to deliver the rest of the projects?
As long as we don't end up parachuting new projects in during the course of the year, bear in mind that, don't forget, some of these carried forwards was a series of grants we got right at the end of the year, the LRCI grants, which we weren't part of our original budget, and suddenly we get a whack of additional cash. Most local governments never say no to someone giving them additional cash, and we just add that to the list of projects to deliver.
Okay.
But we do have a scale, I think, here of somewhere between 30 to 35 million is the maximum amount of work we can get through.
Okay. So those grants, capital expenditures reserves, how long can we carry forward that?
CEO.
Thank you, through the chair. We can continue to carry forward as long as council make the decision to carry forward, and as long as as any tied grant funding allows us to do that. However, if we got a grant, let's say for a particular project, where we're Canning Vale Regional Sports Centre, we were given a grant of $2 million, or a Metropolitan Regional Road grant, and we just didn't spend it, then the grantee will ask us for the money back.
Yeah, so that's why the carry forward, one of the risks is...
Normally you might get grace for a year, but for instance, just under Metropolitan Regional Road grant, if you do not spend the money, they ask for the funds to come back.
Okay, so would you consider that to be subcontract?
Councillor, I'll just ask you to direct your questions through the chair, because I have to rule on each question.
Just,
so
same
you're just
topic.
having a conversation with the CEO.
Okay.
So just direct your question through the chair,
So,
as a courtesy. Thank you.
Unless you want to answer this, Mayor, or CEO want to
I
answer
think
the
I could
question.
answer it, but I'm happy for the CEO to do it.
Okay.
As long as we're looking at the right report, but go ahead.
We are looking at
We
the
are?
right... Yes, CEO and myself
Terrific.
are talking...
Okay, what's your
Hang
question,
on, sorry. Just last 5 minutes we are talking the same report.
What's your question, councillor?
I did ask a question.
I didn't hear the question. Can you repeat the question? What was the question?
I'm asking the question whether if we were to be doing any of the grants for next 2 years, whether we could do that. So do we have any of the grants for a particular year? Are we locked in, or are we a bit flexible at the moment in these expenditures? Is any of the grants locked in, or is it flexible for us to keep carrying forward?
CEO.
We need to know that, because
CEO,
if we do not...
Thank you. I heard your question. Got it. Theo.
Thank you.
CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, there is flexibility with some grants, but as I indicated, the guidance for Metropolitan Regional Road grants, if we don't spend the money, firstly, we don't get new projects added in, and they will take the money back off us. And that's to stop local governments accumulating grant and then just not delivering the projects. If we received a large capital grant, a project like the Canning Vale Regional Sports Complex, we would have to have a project for delivery of that in order to continue to receive the subsequent year grants. There is always some flexibility, but you have to, if we were carrying projects over multiple years, then the grantee would probably ask for the money back.
Okay, thank you. And I have one more question on that. And is it possible for us to have the list or the picture of it, some out of the 20 million or something carried forward, like 5 million for Canning Vale or something, or 2 million for Willetton, or 1 million for Queen's Park? Is there a picture? Can we see that? So
Director Bowe.
that gives us an idea for us where we are travelling.
Thank you. Director Bowe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd draw Councillor Ponathore's attention to paragraph 19B, which lists 19D, which lists about $10 million worth of projects that are carried forward, which will be familiar to a number of elected members,
Yep.
and a number of those projects will be finished over the next few months. And if you look at Cecil Avenue and the Lake Street Urban Stream will be finished next year, so the likelihood that those carried forward projects will be completed are strong.
Thank you, Director
Thank you.
Ball. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Councillor Barry.
And I'm just trying to get my head around what Councillor Ponaturo was saying, because on page 10, the adopted budget 31,106,225, is that last year's budget or this coming year's budget
Director Bowe.
as capital expenditure?
The column under adopted budget, Councillor Barry, 31, was the amount of projects that were adopted when Council endorsed the budget in June, and then the 20 million of carry forwards are what we're seeking Council to incorporate into the budget from last year.
So
Thank you.
this
Councillor Barry.
harks back to my first question, and I'll ask it again, because if we have 31 plus carry forwards of 21, that gives us $51 million in capital expenditure. And last year we had 55, and the administration said it's beyond the means of our organisation to complete this in one single financial year.
The question?
Thank you,
The question is,
Mr Mayor.
how are we
No,
gonna do
I
it?
understand the question, and I'll refer to my previous answer to Councillor Panuthrai, where we list the projects that are carried forward, which are already under construction or will be completed. There's other projects in there that are carried forward, like the Burrendale Boulevard and the Community Piazza, which are, if not complete, then nearing completion already. So whilst the quantum is 20 million, a lot of those will be knocked off in the first few months of this financial year.
So we will be able to do $51 million worth of work next financial year.
See, Director Bowe.
No,
is
we're
that
talking
correct?
about this financial year, and we'll do
This financial year.
a significant amount of that work this financial year, yes.
Significant amount or all, because the point that I suppose I've made before is that it's a bit like the banks. If they're not giving the service, and people are paying for a service that they're not getting, and we either can
Question?
do it or we can't.
I'm happy to answer the question,
You
Mr Mayor,
go ahead,
because
Mr. Bowe.
as I've mentioned in the report, and as I've mentioned, and as previous finance director in this organisation has mentioned, there will always be carry forward projects every year that the city undertakes its budget. Our aim is to minimise the carry forward projects, including on the basis that you're putting forward, which is that the ratepayers are rated for the budget and the capital works program on an annual basis. But there will always be carry forward projects, and there will always be a proportion of projects that are not finished in the single financial year, notwithstanding that we raise the rates to complete them in a single year.
Yes,
Yes,
well, going to
Councillor
the
Barry.
rates, I mean, when you say the rates, we're collecting an extra $11 million a year this financial year in rates, but we're surely going to have this year's budget, the capital works to be done, and now we're adding in another $20 million worth of work that we couldn't do before. I've never seen a figure like $20 million before in a carryover. Not in all my time on council.
Director Bowe.
And I think the simple answer and the simple reason for that is because we've never had a $55 million capital works program before, Mr Mayor.
But it wasn't done. And they used to carry forward items when they were $10 million over. So thanks.
Okay,
We'll
thank
leave
you.
it till next
Anyone
week.
else? Councillor Kunze? No? Thank you. We'll move on to the monthly financial report, CC 043 of 21. The recommendation is on page 21 of the circulated late agenda and is also on the screen. Councillors, are there any questions in relation to that? Councillor Ponaturi? Page 27.
Just my general question on when we adopted the budget on the 24th of June, we agreed about the one-page report on the top of this financial report, especially on the model 2, option 2 of the model for rates. That's where we think in 2023 we'll be in a better balanced budget situation. So are we able to have that one-page report sitting on the top in a simple way? Any layman, non-financial person can understand?
Director Bowe?
Yes, we can, Mr Mayor, and we're working on preparing a quarterly report that represents the progress of capital expenditure to
That's
be
good news.
included.
Yep, terrific news.
just
Thank you.
following on that, sorry, through you,
Thank you.
Mayor to Director Paul, I think, CEO, so we did agree that we will have it from the 1st of July. My question is not only the capital expenditures, just a picture of the operational expenditures, revenue expenditure, CapEx expenditure and revenue, and also where the investments are, just a one-page report, and also from what we adapted from the rating statement, which is important. So then we know that we are definitely traveling in the right path, that we are not deviating or any variation, or how are we going to manage the variation risk. So can we have the copy of the draft at least, so we know where the draft is looking like, what we are thinking and expecting it? Is that possible,
Director
please?
Bowe, we
This is very important.
Would that be probably for October or something? Or?
Yeah, we can certainly provide the draft, but at the moment we're representing in the graph our progress with our capital program. In attachment 2, we're representing where the investments are, and throughout the report we identify how we're travelling to budget for operational expenditure. But I'm happy to work with our finance team to put that in a single graph and send out a draft to the elected members for review.
It's happening, Councillor.
Just following that, okay.
Thank you.
I'm not trying to be difficult. It's just what I was trying to say is just the, not just everything is in a graph form, but it's just the operational income expenditure, or even whatever the format you're using it, if you can share with us, we know that is that what we're expecting in, because only on that condition we all agreed and approved the budget, and because we are here only to look after basically opennessly taking the accountability of the people's money. Thank you.
CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So we certainly, and I don't know if it occurred this month, but the intent was to provide the one-page statement showing the charts for each month. But to give you a more holistic picture against Model 2, you can only really do that on a quarterly basis. You don't see enough movement month to month to be able to show any trends or deviations from it. It's not significant. So the intent is at the end of each quarter to come back against the Model 2 and to provide that level of that snapshot you're referring to, 1 page or 2 pages. But you need at least 3 months worth of data to go through to be able to give yourself meaningful comparison.
Thank you, CEO. Any other questions, councillors, before we move on? Councillor Barry.
Yes, just a couple in the warrant listings, Chair. On page 44, there is one which says outsourced business support solutions for 41,000. There's another couple in there that are different private IT software providers. Just a question, because my understanding was that we were always going to be using Technology One. Are all these systems compatible with Technology One, or I was under the impression the amount of money we were spending?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Barry. The city has chosen to go down the Technology One Council solution, and all of the IT modules that we use are compatible with that system. That doesn't obviate the need to bring in external IT consultants for various specialities from time to time. But I will follow up on the outsourced business support solutions.
That's just one, but there was another 2 or 3, and I'm just wondering whether that Technology One is overarching on every software licence and register that we have.
It's our preferred platform. We still do have Civica Authority for our rates module, but almost all of the main proprietary modules that we use now are integrated into the One Council system.
Okay, and on page 45, it's got the LGIS insurance, 1,120,000 thereabouts. I'd just like to know how many separate insurances does that cover? Or
Director.
does it cover all of the city's insurances?
Director Bowe.
It covers all of the city's insurances, Councillor Barry, and you'll also note that it's paid ahead of the budget profile that we expected to pay it, hence the variance report in this monthly financial.
I didn't see that one, but I'm very, very satisfied that it's everything. And on page 46, if we could just clarify what green light electrical contract is for 158,000, maybe street lights, I don't know, but if you could please.
Did you want to take that on notice, Director? That one?
Yeah, I'll take that on notice.
Thank you.
Mr.
Get
Mayor,
back to you on
but
that, Councillor Barry.
I think Acting Director Primo can answer that one. In fact, Mr. Mayor.
Acting Director.
So that relates to condition assessments of lighting infrastructure that the city owns, and we have to inspect them to make sure the integrity of them is sufficient to keep operating and that they don't collapse, that type of thing. So that's what they're employed for.
So I would assume that that figure is completed.
Acting Director?
I believe that that is the sum for that bulk of work, but we do it periodically. So there may be other inspections or follow-up work that comes out of
So
that.
that will cost more on top.
That would be costing on top. But that is, from recollection, the cost of the inspections that the audit programme that we procured at this point in time.
So the question then is, I thought the light poles and stuff, is that what you're talking about? Yeah, I thought they were Western Power. So are we doing an audit on Western Power's infrastructure?
No, that's not
No.
correct. Through you, Mr Mayor, that is city-owned assets.
Or city-owned
yeah.
assets?
Yep. So we own some street lighting. We also own some lighting assets on, for example, reserves.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions before we move on? Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to, Councillor Holland.
I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
One, first of all, we paid the City of Coburn $389,000. What was that for?
Waste.
Director Bowe?
Graham, your thing.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I believe that would be our waste disposal contract with the City of Coburn.
Councillor Holland?
And the other one is, how are we going on reducing the use of temporary staffing organisations? We're still $150,000 a month now. I brought this up before. You said you were going to look into it and we should be going down, but it doesn't seem to be going down. I thought it was supposed to be coming down now.
Director Bowe?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Acting Director Amprimo is able to answer that one.
Oh, thank you. Acting Director.
Through you, Mr Mayor, we don't anticipate the cost of labour hire expenditure to go down until early next year. We still have continued staff vacancies, and we have had in the last month some more staff leave, and those positions are being covered through labour hire.
Councillor?
I seem to remember that I was told that it was going to be September onwards this year that we would see these coming down. You seem to be nodding too, Mr.
Director Bowe, can you just provide
Yeah, that's
some...
Councillor Holland's recollection is the same as mine. I do recall telling the council that we'd be reducing our expenditure in that space moving forward, but I've since had discussions with the Director of Canning Environment, and we need to hold over a number of positions to give us the flexibility that we're looking at in relation to our long-term financial plan and in accordance with some of the other information I've provided to elected members regarding staffing levels.
Thank you. Councillor Holland?
So when will we be expecting this level to go down, or is it going to go up in the interim? If that's the case, I'm a bit horrified if it's going to go up.
Director Bowe, are you able to provide an answer to that? Is it going up?
Look, I'm happy to revisit the advice I've put in writing to the elected members and speak with Director Amprimo and just get revisit that advice, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Thanks, councillors. Councillor Ponatorai?
Continuing from Councillor Holland, so if the staff turnover is very high, there's obviously it's saying there's something wrong in the organisation culture, or there's something, or is it more?
I don't think it means there's something wrong in the culture of the organisation.
Or it can be, why are the
I think
people
I find
going?
it very diminishing of the staff here.
I'm not
Can
saying,
you
but
rephrase
there
your
must be
question?
something that people want to make a quick move
Why
out.
would it mean that there's something wrong with the culture of the organisation?
So they want to make a quick move, and they want, so that's why he had the concern about whether it's going to go up or is it going to go down. So that's when we have to take the risk. I mean, we didn't think
Just a
about some of the
question.
risks.
Can I just have a question from you, Councillor Ponatorai? What was your question?
My question is there a bigger turnover happening? What is the reason? Because we need to look at it now. We have to analyze it now before it get worse. That's all I'm saying, because we have been in the same situation with financially. So, and that's our responsibility to make that happen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Certainly the turnover rate of the administration is not the remit of the council. There is no significant issues with turnover rates across the Canning Environment program. There are various reasons why staff leave the employment of the City of Canning. I happen to know within a specific area, Ms Amprimo's area, canning environment. There are a number of other issues which can't be discussed at this forum. People leave the organisation, I think, between 10 and 15% is a reasonable benchmark. We don't have a problem with undue turnover in this organisation.
Thank you. Councillor?
Is there something that would you like to talk to us confidentially under cover?
I think I just would like to restate that the employment and the staff turnover at the City of Canning is not the remit of the council, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor, Deputy Mayor.
Just 10-15%, is that annually, Director?
Director, vote.
Yeah, that's what we'd base that on.
Thank you. Councillor Sweeney?
Just for Mr Bowe, thanks Mr Mayor, if I could. Just so, how many vacant FTEs presently do we have?
Is that a question that you may need to take on notice?
Off the top of my head, yeah, thanks Mr Mayor. I'm happy to take that question on notice and revisit the information I've already provided to Councillor Sweeney in response to a previous question on that.
Thank you. We'll get that back to you, Councillor. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to CD 028 of 21. That's a proposed amendment of local planning policy LP06, design review panel and assessment of significant development, post-public consultation and adoption. The responsible officer is Mr Graham Bride, the Director of Canning Development. The recommendation is on page 5 of the agenda and is on the screen. Councillors, any questions on that item? None, thank you. We'll move to CD 029 of 21, City of Canning Animals, Nuisance and Environment, Local Laws 2021. The recommendation is on page 26 of the agenda, is on screen right now. Just in relation to that, I've just got a disclosure of interest form, a declaration by Councillor Barry. Councillor Barry, did you want me just to quickly read that out? Is it? Yeah, I'll just read it out. Councillor Barry's making a declaration he's made previously when similar items have been raised. It's in relation to this report, the report title being City of Canning Animals, Nuisance and Environmental Local Laws 2021. He's making an impartiality, his interest is impartiality. He makes the disclosure that he has 4 chickens. Is that correct, Councillor? Thank you very much. I hope they're all well. Okay, thank you. Councillor, is there any questions in relation to that item? Councillor Kunza.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, just got a couple of questions. With 2.6b of the policy, this was changed. I think it was questions that the Mayor asked regarding contemporary, how close houses are together these days, and it was changed from 6 metres to 5 metres from an opening to a dwelling house or on any other lot. 2.8 relates to conditions for keeping aviary birds. I just wonder why that, it's a similar, exactly the same issue. Just wonder why that's not the same wording with respect to the at least 6 metres from a dwelling house, and whether it should be consistent with what's been provided for poultry.
Director Bride.
Yeah, through Mr Mayor, I might get Clint Burdett, Manager of Regulatory Services, to answer that one.
Mr Clint Burdett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Kunza. Yeah, the poultry clause we've changed down to 5 metres. That's consistent with the current consolidated local laws. We had a look at the aviary birds and also the requirements for pigeons. We didn't change that. The aviary birds, there is an issue that we get with noise that's greater than the noise that you get from poultry. That's why we left that at 6 and reduced the poultry to 5. So we had a chat with the officers that go out on site and deal with poultry complaints and said, would we be open to looking at that distance? What would it be? What would be reasonable? So we reduced that to 5. We didn't deal with the aviary birds one because of the noise.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Kunza. Thank you, Mr Burdett. Any further questions before we move on?
Yeah, I've got a few more, Mr Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Kunza.
I mean, it was quite a comical moment in my time on council, but with respect to the rules about pigs, now that we know that miniature pigs can be the same size as normal pigs, what is the argument for allowing miniature pigs but not allowing normal pigs?
Mr Burdett.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. The local laws define a miniature pig, so that there's a definition of no greater than 100 kilos and no higher than 750 in height. So depending on the species of pig, it's possible to have a pig that size, but the traditional miniature pig that you might find on Google is not available in Australia. Thank goodness. Yeah, so there is restrictions on the size of the pig. There is some species that can be limited in height and in weight. So there's a difference between a normal pig and a pig that we're defining as one that's miniature.
Councillor?
Do we weigh the pig that was in Linwood?
What lengths do we go to with these? Do people apply? How does it work?
Sorry, I missed that question. Sorry, Councillor.
Councillor Kunza?
Oh, yes.
Councillor Kunza, I'll just have to ask you to speak into your microphone. We can't hear you.
Sorry. So the pig that was in Linwood, that was a large pig, the same size of a normal pig, but it was a miniature pig. How do we differentiate? Like, did we weigh the pig?
I don't like the use of the word normal.
Sorry.
Sorry? How do we determine that, Mr Burdett? You obviously heard the question from Councillor Kunza.
I suppose anecdotally, the person that wants to keep a miniature pig, is fairly passionate about it, and we would expect that they take them to the vet. They can be weighed on the vet scales, which enables for a large animal to be weighed. We'd get some confirmation of the weight of the animal through that means.
Okay. Councillor Kunza?
Yeah, a few years ago, last year, people from Restrada Primary School, I spoke with you, Mr Burdett, about their desire to have a sheep on site with respect to the community garden they've got there. And it wasn't permissible under the local law, but it was mentioned that we might build into this updated local law parameters that might allow that in the future. I was just wondering, I didn't really see anything, whether or not that was actually discussed.
Is there some flexibility in the local law, Mr Burdett?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, clause 2.2 deals with large animals. And what we've done is we've included, at clause 2.9, there's exemptions. We've included in there clause 2.2. So the Rostrata Primary School, if they wanted to keep that sheep, can obtain an exemption from the city to do so.
Councillor Kunza?
Yeah, thanks for that. And just lastly, why, so is there a reason with the exemptions why you haven't included 2.5 potentially if somebody wanted a goose on their property? I mean, the City of Canning has different types of property and it just seems as though it's rural, residential and rural. If someone was to apply to allow a goose on their property, which might sound strange, but people have geese not just on farmland, whether or not that could be allowed as well?
Mr Burdett?
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, the reason that we haven't included that is because of the noise that's associated with the particular animals. So our view is that there is quite a bit of noise that can be associated with them. As traditionally what local governments do is they restrict those animals not being in residential area because of the noise.
Thank you, Councillor. Strike that from the record, please, CEO. Thank you. Any other questions in relation to that, Deputy Mayor?
Following on from the pigs, no, I'm not talking about pigs. The sheep, at the moment in Mason Ward, there's a few people that keep sheep, goats, a few, 3 or 4, 5 or 6 on the property. At the moment, what's the status with that? And under that actually have to, my understanding is that they actually have to seek an exemption. Is that correct?
Mr Burdett?
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, that's correct. So currently they couldn't do it. With the new laws, they'll be able to do it with an exemption from the city.
Okay. Thank you, Councillors. Councillor Bone?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. 3.2, did the city consider being more prescriptive when it came to the use of rodenticide, considering its impact on native wildlife?
Mr Burdett?
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. We haven't defined the definition of rodenticide as far as I'm aware. It's a fairly commonly used term. In our experience, it tends to be the products that are purchased from Bunnings. But the law is, as it states, we haven't gone into the environmental impact of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillors. We'll move on to report. Thank you, Mr Burdett. We'll move on to report CD 030 of 21, The title of that report being City of Canning Local Law, Property and Public Places Local Law, 2021. The recommendation is on page 62 of the agenda and is also on screen. Councillors, are there any questions in relation to that item? Councillor Bain?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. 4 questions, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Large boulders or rocks permissible veg treatments?
Director Bride.
I might just ask Mr Burdett to answer
Mr.
that
Burdett, large rocks or boulders as verge treatments? You're talking about from a landscaping aspect, if somebody had like a nature strip or?
Specifically put on a verge to stop people parking on it.
Oh, okay. So along the edge of the road to stop people from parking there, I don't think that's, that would be allowed. But Mr. Burdett.
Yeah, thank you. Through me, so I'd have to review the policy. My understanding is that it's not. It would be a verge obstruction.
Get back to you on that one, Councillor Bain.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. If the city could possibly get back to council in regard to how many abandoned shopping trolleys have been reported in the last 6 months, and if any fines have been issued in those 6 months.
Do we have those figures, Director? Oh, Acting Director. Shopping trolleys? No? Sorry, that'll be a ranger type question. Can we get back to that?
Yep.
Did you, the question was how many? Okay. Director, Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And if any fines have been issued in the last 6 months, and have the major retailers been informed of the proposed local law in regard to the restricted area and the shopping trolleys?
Has there been communication in regards to that, Director?
Yeah, through Mr Mayor. Obviously, if council endorses the local law, then obviously that becomes, but it was advertised quite widely. I'm not sure whether we specifically went to the retailers, no. But
We
certainly
didn't specifically go to the retailers. Yep. Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Holland?
Yeah, just on that, I just wanted to, something came up as well. With the shopping trolleys, we don't go and get them, do we, and pick them up and take them back, do we, with our ranger services, do we?
Do we seize them, or what's the...
I hope not.
What do we do with those, Doctor?
No, we don't. Well, we generally don't seize them. We have an arrangement where we log them, we notify them with the retailer, and they have a period of time in which to go and collect them.
Thank you.
If they don't collect them, what happens then?
I believe it's a fine, but I'll come back to you
And what happens to the trolley?
Director?
I have to come back to you on notice on that one.
We'll come back to you on the issue of trolleys. We'll provide some information for the council. Thank you, councillors. We will move on then to EN 017 of 21, the item, the report title being Park Search and Discover Digital Solution. The recommendation is on page 71 of the agenda, is on screen. Councillors, are there any questions in relation to that? No, thank you. Councillor Kunza. Councillor Kunza.
Yeah, sorry, I just come up to it. I can't get my head around the $85,000 for getting the information on the 279 parks and places. The sum of $85,000 would be required for a comprehensive assessment of all the city's parks. Surely we already know what's in our parks and reserves. Can't you just have staff that attend these places confirm what's there?
Acting Director Primo.
So the answer is no, we don't have all of the data on what is in the parks, and if we were to have staff that go and visit them, firstly, the skill sets probably don't align with the staff that go there to do maintenance work to pick up that type of information, but we would still need a mechanism for which they record that information and then bring it back and put it into our system, so there'll be a lot of handling of that information. So we have tried to capture information for our key assets, but these particular asset groups are not our primary focus. Our primary focus on collecting asset data is around improving the information that will inform the long-term financial plan.
Councillor.
Yeah, so for example, like Medillion Park has a playground, a park bench, might have a barbecue. You know that material, that information?
Acting Director.
Through you, Mr Mayor, no, we don't have that information for all of our parks.
Councillor Kunze.
So how do we know what has been the plan over a long time in terms of replacing the assets?
Acting Director.
That is one of our challenges with our long-term financial plan, and that is what we're working to fill the gaps with. But because these particular assets are relatively low value compared to our asset portfolio, they wouldn't be a priority to pick up the information. We look to gather information as a priority on assets that have a significant impact on the long-term financial plan.
Councillor.
So if we don't endorse this, that this information won't be picked up until such time that we need to, in the future, acquire this information?
Acting Director of Primo.
That is correct. We will systematically go through our assets with the resources we have and pick up the ones that are our priority to inform the long-term financial plan. And these assets, given the value of them, would not be a high priority.
And lastly, is there a way we can actually include the community to actually say to them, use our community engagement team and say what they like about their park and actually have them tell us what's at their park?
Acting Director.
I'm having to look at that as an option and investigate it further.
Be considered as an option. Thank you. Councillor Pontori.
I'm glad that Councillor Kunsa asked the questions which I wanted to ask, or I've discussed with the Acting Director. So this is more than the notice of motions coming up. It's just a bit of an eye-opener for all of us that this is a very basic asset strategy. So just my first question is, so how do we allocate work? People go out and do some work in the park if we don't know what equipments and how old they are. How do we allocate the workload for workers? So that's what's something alarming me.
Acting Director or Acting Director of Primo?
So, for example, if you take barbecues, we will have cleaning rosters and we will know where they are for the cleaners to go and clean those barbecues, but we don't have that information in an accessible way that we can start pulling it into the type of application that we're looking at here. So we have elements of the data, but to make it in a format that we could put it into the online information, we would need to do further work on processing that. So we have some information and we also have some gaps, and I note your concerns around how we plan for renewals. That is why I'm saying to you that picking up that asset data is something that we need to do, but in terms of a priority, assets of that type of value, so we know where we have playgrounds because there is compliance issues around them and they are audited, but we don't necessarily know all of the features in that park. So, for example, we would know where a playground was and we would know that it has to be renewed because there are specific things around that asset that we really need to have as a high priority to know. But if we don't know that a barbecue needs renewed in 2 years' time, in terms of our long-term financial plan and our financial management, that has a very minimal impact.
Councillor?
Okay. My question wasn't even about the renewing, but my question was, if I don't know what equipments or what and how, what is the lifetime of an asset in the particular parks, how do you allocate workload for contractors or employees to go and do a job? Like, for example, if I have to send someone to do a job, in this particular park I've got slides or barbecue and something else, then I will allocate 3 people or whatever the maintenance is. If in another park we only have 2 seesaws or whatever it is, and we probably allocate someone else in a lesser at times. So obviously because we allocate or we subcontract and we pay for all of that. So how do we forward planning we do or we have been doing? Because that is a very high risk here. I'm not even worried about this. My notice of motion was something totally different.
Just your question, Councillor.
But my question is, how do we plan the workload when we don't know what we have in any parks? Is that a worry? No, Director was explaining more about the renewability.
Director Bowe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the low-value pool assets, we would do reactive work. We don't go around searching for broken benches. We don't have the resources to go around searching for broken benches. For the low-value pool, we would respond to complaints or things that are picked up by our maintenance crews or our contractors whilst we're out there. We do have data regarding where our high-value assets like our barbecues at $20,000 or our playgrounds at $80,000 or our shelters and things like that are higher value assets. We have some some data on that, relatively accurate. But what Acting Director Amprimo is trying to tell you is that if we go towards a system that we are interacting with the community on, we want to have a 100% or near enough degree of accuracy and confidence that the data that we have reflects what's actually on the ground. And that's the truthing and the work that we have to undertake to implement the notice of motion.
Thank you. Director? Oh.
Okay, I'll come back.
Deputy Mayor?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I've got a few questions. The first question is, in today's age, tech ages incredibly fast. Now, I've looked at the cost here, and is there going to be an ongoing cost to keep this app and this technology and this information up to date?
Are there ongoing maintenance costs with an app, Acting Director? I don't know.
So this is not proposing to use an app. This one is proposing to use the city's website platform to do that. So it would be updated as part of the platform, and that's why we, one of the reasons in the report that it details that an app is actually not the preferred option, because there will be ongoing issues every time, the App Store doesn't support it or the Google Store doesn't support it. You have to upgrade it. So,
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you go on to Google and you type in, for example, one of our parks, Kent Street Weir Park, you get a rating, you get what time it's open, you get a 360 view, you get a video, you get photos, you get ratings. Are we going to be able to offer anything more than what, Big Tech's offering at the moment?
The Deputy Mayor saying that most of this information already appears to be available on the internet. What else will this provide? Other than what's already available?
Yeah, your point is very valid, Deputy Mayor. There is a lot of information out there already on the local parks through those platforms. There is questions though around how up to date it is.
Anything further, Deputy Mayor? Councillor Holland?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, on the page that you go onto on that website, it has got the data, the information on there, so we have got that. I'm questioning the timing of this. There's 103,000 and an allocation to upgrade park signage, so we don't even know how much that is yet, and we're just going through a hell of a financial crisis at the moment, and this is outside the budgetary sessions that we've done. Why are we doing this now? And we don't even know what this part two, how much that's going to cost. We're trying to restrain the budget. Now we're going to add in at least a minimum, I would say, if you're going to do QR codes, another 50 grand of 150 grand, which we haven't allocated for, which goes against the long-term financial plan, which also goes against the 3-year plan we were going to turn around into the black. I don't see how we can. And why is this here?
Acting Director?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the officer recommendation is to include it in the draft 2022-23 budget, which then would be considered by council, and council at that point in time could decide whether it was a priority or not in the context of the budget. So this is for next year's annual budget.
Yeah, I realise it's for 22-23, I realise that, but we've got a long-term financial plan, and we had a 3-year plan set out by Mr. Kane, and this is altering that 3-year plan before we've even got halfway through the first year. I can't. Why are we spending all this money? Now, that's one question. The other question is, what worries me about the QR codes is the damage and the futility it'll be after a week.
Director Bowe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To be perfectly frank, Councillor Holland, it is in response to a notice of motion that we are investigating these options. We came up and presented with a couple of options at a strategic issues briefing earlier this year. We've changed tack in relation to the use of an app after further investigation. This is simply a recommendation that's responding to the notice of motion.
Thank you. Councillor Holland, anything further? Sorry?
Sorry, and the last part, the allocation, how much are we looking at for an allocation? I don't think you can just say an allocation.
Do we have a provisional sum for an allocation? I tend to agree, it just says an allocation. CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think we'll take that on notice if that's right for this and come back with more specific information.
Thank you. Councillor Barry?
I'm just wondering that, I think we've got something like 140 odd parks. And I'm just wondering whether this officer recommendation is in some way meant to ameliorate, I suppose, the number of poor parks that we do have, probably more than we have medium and or good parks. And the other question I had to ask is...
I might just go with that first question.
Yep.
So the question was whether or not this is a...
In some way, this recommendation
Yep.
is to ameliorate the fact that we've got 143 parks and we've got so many that are in poor condition. Is this meant to uplift our knowledge as to what we've got in the park so that we
Acting
don't
Director.
end up with more poor parks?
Is that the purpose of this or not?
No, that's not the purpose of this.
No, that's not the purpose of this.
Oh, may help, but just the other thing, the 103,000, given that we said earlier on the night it was 158,000 for green light, does this include somebody going around and auditing all those parks?
Acting Director?
Auditing the condition of them, no.
Because we don't know that now, do we?
Acting Director?
That information is variable at the moment.
Sorry, excuse?
Variable.
Variable.
What does that mean?
We have it to different degrees of accuracy.
Councillor Barry?
All right, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Pontoro?
Thank you. So with the notice of motion when I brought in, I wasn't aware that our asset management strategy isn't in place or the accuracy is not the best. My question is to CEO, just quickly, through the budget, through Mayor, through the workshops, this is something we really highlighted because the major risk area we found that we did not allocate reserve funds for depreciation of asset management. So this is also kind of an asset management. It can be compared to some other assets, maybe lesser cost. So how are we traveling with all our new strategic plan with the asset management? Where are we going? Where are we now? That's my question, because it's not this notice of motion is not most important at the moment.
I'll allow the question, but Councillor, I'll just remind you that the question has to be related to this item, and that is Park Search and Discover Digital Solution, asking questions about that, not about delivery of strategies and a whole range of things. So,
it's not about... Yeah, but the problem right now, the major risk here is because we don't have an accurate asset management strategy.
Yeah.
It's not about even you allowing this, because the main risk here, because we don't have the 100% accuracy
hang on
data.
Just 1 second. It is about the relevance of it. So I have to rule on every question that you ask. And tonight, in relation to this AB, questions at an AB must be relevant to the item. So if you're asking about some part of the report tonight, if there's a matter in the report you want to address, you can ask a question about it, but you're asking about a matter that can be taken offline because you're asking the CEO about long-term strategies that are on the periphery of this. So I don't find it relevant, but I did say I'll allow the CEO to answer it. I'm just asking you to be relevant to this item, that's all. Thank you. No, I don't need a response. Thank you. CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and we are, I'm happy to say, well down the track now with the asset management plan and integration of the asset management plans into long-term financial plan. I'm getting a brief literally every 2 weeks on the status of those documents, and I'm comfortable they're getting a very high level of fidelity. What this would do is help us to fill some of those gaps in. As I think Councillor Holland picked up through this, there's stuff out there which we have been built in the past and we just don't know. It's a low value asset, so we aren't capturing it until someone rings up and says, look, the park bench is broken, fix it, and then we'll know, oh, there's a park bench out there. Unless we go out and capture every single asset like that, we won't know the condition of them. I'll make one other observation. One of the things we're dealing with is the strategic drainage network. We have very high level of accuracy on the location of all the pits, and we adduct all the pits, but we do not have any high level of data accuracy on the condition of all the pipes that run through the city of Canning. There's things out there which we know what they are, but we just don't know what the conditions are. We probably won't resolve that through this round of asset management planning. What we'll need to do in this round of asset management planning is to allow for an annual allocation to do a gradual pipe inspection across the whole of the city's network. Otherwise, you'll never ever know what condition the assets are that are below ground. You just don't see them.
Councillor Ponatore.
Continuing that, I just want to know when will this part of the park strategy information will be captured, part of the major asset plan? So if we don't have to rush and spend money now to do this, but when will this information be captured? Or we don't know yet. It could take us 6 months, or it could take 1 year, or what do you think? It's a question through you to see.
Acting Director Amprino, do we know?
I would anticipate you're looking at about 3 years out.
A couple of years out. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just following on from the question line I had earlier. So just walk me through this. I go to the park, I scan the QR code. It says 2 swings, a water fountain and a footpath. I'm already at the park. I can see the swings, I can see the water fountain, and I can see the path. I also see a sign that says the park name. So I don't quite understand why we need to send someone to ground truth something that I'm already at the park. I'm not like I'm thinking of going to the park. I'm already at the park. So
Just your question.
the question is, I don't see how, look, I know QR codes are very popular at the moment, but are we sort of taking the QR codes to this new level that doesn't really need to be? Because everyone knows it's Canning, City of Canning Park. It's got a name on it, and when you go there, most of these parks are not very big. You can see in my daughter would be able to see in 10 seconds what the park's got.
So a reason why we specifically have included... Oh, Mr Johnson, would you like to step forward to the lectern? Thank you. Mr.
Through you,
Johnson.
Mr Mayor. Can you imagine going to a park that's perhaps 30 hectares and you can't see from one side of the park to the other? So the idea of a QR code is to give you that information, but can also give you information about why is that park called Centenary Park? Why is it called that? What's the history of it? But it can also give you information about potentially who's booked the reserve at any one time. Is there sporting fixtures on? So there's all sorts of information that it can provide, not just about the assets.
Thank you. Councillor Holland?
What park have we got that is 30 hectares?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question. How many do we have that are 30 hectares?
I can get back to you on that, but I think if you look at Canning River Regional Park as a great example, where you could provide all sorts of information from one end of Canning to the other.
Thank you, Councillor Holland.
But my little park, Hawkesbury Park, my goodness me, you put a QR code there, it's just bloody ridiculous. It's just a little lake with a little park bench, and over the road, the same. Finding out the name of it, in some respects, yeah, might be good, but I'm having trouble coming to grips with why we would need that to spend money on this in this particular climate.
You have a
I
question?
can't see that. I know it was a notice of motion, I realise that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kunta?
And without getting into debate, is it, to Mr Johnson, is it also not to help provide information for the neighbourhood maps so that if you're wanting to find a park with a barbecue, you can actually look online and find it?
Mr Johnson?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's correct, Councillor Kunza. The QR code will link you to the neighbourhood map, and that's where you'll be able to do some search function and find out what's in that park or other parks.
Okay, thank you, councillors. Oh, Councillor Holland?
Which you could find from Google Maps.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, unless there's any further questions on that matter, we might just move on. Thank you. We'll move on to CO006. Thank you, Mr Johnson. Of 21, review policy CM179, community engagement. The recommendation is on page 83 of the agenda and is on screen. Councillors, are there any questions in relation to the community engagement policy review? Councillor Barry, yes?
The question I have is, once again, like Councillor Holland says, in view of the current climate, economic-wise, what more does this deliver that currently doesn't, apart from the fact that if we're going to have to be going through interpreters and stuff like that, it's going to cost us, I don't know, arm or a leg. Once again, it's just a financial burden on the... Do we think it's a financial burden on the the city which may not necessarily need to be at this particular point in time?
Director McQuaid.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. No, I don't believe it's a financial burden on the city. I think it's an imperative for the city to seek the voices of community to inform the decision-making of council. To date, we haven't seen costs exponentially increase through the community engagement activities, and as the report details and as per the strategic issues briefing, the city is already doing this. This is our level of community engagement that we're already undertaking now. The policy is just reflecting the work that we're doing and ensures that we are positioning the community at the centre of the decision-making process.
Anything further, councillors? Thank you. Thank you very much, councillors. I'll move to item 9, which is urgent business. This evening there is none. Confidential matters this evening there are none. Closure. There being no further business, I declare the agenda briefing closed. The time now is, by my recollection, 7:19 p.m, and I thank everyone for their attendance.